Oh God, what did I call the panel again?
You don't have pretend that there's an amazing slide.
Modern theater, games recreating the theatrical experience. Welcome. So my name is Sean Weiland. I guess we'll do a quick kind of intro of ourselves and maybe our backgrounds a little bit. I have a BA in theater and I have a master's degree in video game development, and I have worked in both and suffered the pangs and arrows of not working in both. And I wrote a thesis from a master's degree about how theatrical production could inform video game production, and out of all that research has been a broader conversation of, dude, this is like a lot of the same stuff, just in a modern digital experience. And that's why I wanted to do this today.
And how do we know each other, Sean?
Well, okay.
Should we do that, or should we wait till the end?
Well, let's introduce yourselves, and then we'll how we met.
We all three actually know each other.
We've killed before.
We may have, collectively, the three of us know where the bodies are. But we'll never tell each other.
A third of one.
A third. Together, we will figure it out. Hi, I'm Bonnie Bogovich. This is my, I don't know how many MAGFests, at least 5. I've been performing here the last couple of years as part of the Super Smash Opera series, which the sequel was Aria Kart, hence my fabulous outfit designed by Liz Rischel over here, in which we sing a lot of classical music done to people killing each other in Nintendo costumes. I also run a puppet troupe online called the Block Choir. They sing video game covers. But my main day job is I'm a voice actor and narrator and sound designer for video games and educational media. And before I got into working that as my day job, I thought I would be a career stage manager, where I toured a lot backstage doing, stage management. Woo. It's the thankless job. And I did that for at least 10 years with ballet, opera, musical theater troupes, a lot of modern art, avant-garde stuff, weird puppets with battery packs and things. And you learn a lot doing stage management. I always tell people that a lot of things I learned for games I totally take from my past life. And I actually recently gave a similar panel, which is why I was happy to jump on Sean's, called Life. Oh God, All the World's a Stage, Why Theater Nerds Make Great Game Designers. And I gave it with a couple similar people at Game SoundCon. And it was so much fun, I wanted to do this. So that's my thing, and here's Liz.
Hi, I'm Liz Rischel. I was sort of brought on because I know both of these people from other projects. Bonnie and I go way back. I've been coming to MAGFest for a while. I sing opera and do theater and like to do video game themed pastiche opera pieces with Bonnie and our various team of people. My day hustle is that I'm a costumer. I costume for movies and the theater in Pittsburgh. When things come to film in Pittsburgh, they call us on. And it's kind of crazy. We do a lot of various intersecting projects in our spare time.
Yeah, we've co-written a couple projects together. Liz has done voice acting for me for clients in video games before.
That's true. I play a steampunk scientist in just about everything I do.
And can I say how we three know each other?
Oh, yeah, sure.
I'm in the middle. I'm a sandwich.
Do it.
And I think about 2 years ago, Liz and I started up a big project. It was the Dracula radio play experience by Cryptic Canticles. It was the entire book of Bram Stoker's Dracula, except put in chronological order for those who have read it. It is not normally. And we turned it into
Mostly, but not quite.
It's mostly in order. The movies always get it wrong. But we did it and released every episode the day that there was something in the book that happened, and it was a podcast series with over 20 voice actors. And Sean here played the fabulous cowboy in the British world, Quincy Morris.
Yeah.
He had to suck on his teeth and do that accent for like 7 months. He did like the.
He was the only one that didn't have to be British.
You're the only one that didn't have to, he's the only one that didn't have to fake a British accent.
Right, I had to fake a Texas accent.
It was awesome.
Right, and
so we've stabbed vampires together.
And Bonnie played Mina Harker,
I was Mina Harker.
a.k.a. Mina Murray.
And all the sounds, effects, and music was me, too.
She did all the sounds and music. And I played Lucy Westenra. That project was...
That wasn't your only role. You were also continuity and dialect.
Yeah, I was continuity supervisor, so that meant I went through the entire book. I highlighted every person's part in a different color, and I sat in on the coachings and made sure that everybody knew why certain things that they were saying was important with relevance to what happened before and what happened next. I also played a baby that got eaten by vampires.
That was fun. And the baby was played by 3 apples that were in my kitchen and had women chewing on them in front of a microphone.
And me. In the closet.
But yes, Quincy, luckily speaking American, didn't need as much dialogue coaching in a British radio drama.
That was wonderful.
It was so much
I was
fun.
like, who are you playing? I'm playing the one American. The one American. So
The lamp passes. Sorry. Anyway.
Nothing clears a room like a Winchester. That's a real line from the play, and it's terrible out of context in modern culture.
Yes, it is.
Which is how I took it when I first read it. So Bonnie and I met.
GDC.
Was it GDC? No, I thought it was the boat.
It might have been the boat.
So basically, happenstantially, and Liz and I had met a few minutes ago. Although we worked
I think
together
it was the first
a
time
couple
we
years
ever
ago.
actually laid eyes on each other.
Right,
because
and it was
we talked
magical.
we talked over Skype endlessly.
Yeah.
Those who work on audio and music projects are probably familiar
Discord,
with
technically.
life over Skype and Google Hangouts and never meeting till MAGFest.
Discord.
Right, but it does remind me a little bit of, at least when I meet other theater people, like the familiarity you kind of instantly get.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
almost like if you don't say it within the first 10 minutes, and you're like, oh yeah, I also work a lot in theater, and they're like, yeah, I could tell.
Yeah.
But there's that kind of, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's because you have that shared experience, or it's a mindset or a personality type that you kind of get that when you start to work in theater, that it's there. But first of all, I appreciate that because it's wonderful as you go from project to project. But I kind of wanted to compare that a little bit to game development because it is game developers. Even though it's a large industry, it's a small community, and I think we're moving. I still don't get that same feeling when I meet other game developers, but it's close. I definitely like have core groups of game developers that I know that I kind of get that kind of theatrical sense from. But do you have a similar experience or not? Maybe the opposite,
Of finding-
going in between theater and video games and those cultures.
I feel that creatives are creatives no matter what genre they are, and you can always sense each other out. Like we all kind of have this bond, like a cosplay designer and somebody who does stop motion animation. I feel will get along better than an engineer and a fry cook maybe in an awkward, just randomly paired together situation. I don't know. I feel artistic types just seem to bond better. I also think that I know that one of the best game narration writers I've ever worked with was Jared Mason back at Shell, and I asked him, like, I said, well, it's weird that I got a job in game audio. I didn't really work in games before I landed this job. I was a stage manager, and I did weird things like zombie operas and Smash and things. And he said, well, I wrote a play about ninjas fighting each other, and that got me my job. I'm like, so you didn't write for games? He's like, no, I wrote a play about ninjas. And it's like, play about ninjas, bloody zombies in an opera, video games. It's like it takes a certain mentality to work in games.
A lot of similar theatrical or thematic elements.
I was going to say that it's very fortunate that we're still kind of in a place where these things are young enough that things haven't solidified into like a very specific archetype. That when people are looking, or at least a couple years ago, people probably still now have been looking for these fuller experiences. There isn't a single track into making games in the same way that there might be for other creative fields, and that's why you can pull from so many different things.
And I guess you could say, like, I know when I was in college years ago, there weren't majors in game design. There weren't majors purely in game audio and interactive audio. I have a music composition degree and a multimedia degree, which even back then was like, multimedia, ooh, that's mysterious, what's that? And I know game developers who have like architecture degrees and just basic computer science, but nothing spelled out the future that led them to their direct job. It was just, it just took a lot of different types of people. But now I feel newer people coming out may have a skewed idea of that. If you don't have degrees specifically that has game in the title, maybe that's not how to get there. I feel like we came from the wild West, where anybody can be in games. I don't know.
I think I straddled that a little bit, but that was like the core of my.
What's your degree, Sean?
Oh, I have a BA in theater, and I have an MS in video game development and production management. But I was like one of the first people in the U.S. to get that degree in 2011.
Yeah, and I was the second or first year of people to attempt a multimedia master's at my college because it was new.
Yeah, and I searched for mine. I looked. Yeah. I'm like, I don't care where I have to go. I just want to get a degree in video games. It was more elaborate than that thought process, but that's what it boils down to.
And it's like, Liz, you do creative costuming for like really awesome Netflix things and musicals now, and you don't have a degree specifically in that.
No, I don't have a degree in that. I have a degree in music education. Luckily, there's a lot of these creative fields that the Jell-O hasn't hardened on yet, and you can still squeeze in.
Well, that's so I've been seeing. So actually, it's one of the points I didn't write down.
Oh.
But
improv.
Well, in comparison to the kind of breadth of emotional experience that theater provides, and I've been seeing even more and more avant-garde theater pieces and digital incorporation of different ways of expressing the theatrical live experience. I feel like, and counterpoint or support, I don't care, contribute. I feel like video games are just now in the last 5-6 years starting to expand into a more emotional realm, a realm where it's not just explode the thing, save the person. It's explore yourself. Maybe save yourself, maybe just have an experience, but in a digital format where it's more about an unverbalized story, so it's just environment and sound and something else.
If you think about it, games have to do a lot more than movies when it comes to alternatives and alternative endings and things like that. Like, we think about film as really pushing technology, but it's games because they really need to have that you play The Walking Dead and you're like, well, I saved this person and now I have to go back and see what happens if I take the other track instead. And they have all that content that never gets seen unless you play it multiple times.
I think whenever you're used to doing live theater versus just animation or something else where you're not physically present on stage, you're more invested in making sure the audience believes what's going on. Like whenever you're standing up there kind of naked to the world and the audience has to observe you, you want... If it's a sad scene, you want them to cry. You want to make sure that they're buying it. They're invested in your character. And I feel that feeling carries over into a lot of things where, like, yes, you care about that person maybe you murdered, or you cared that maybe you left that person without their mom and you're going to see if they survive when the T-Rex attacks in the next scene. But in the older games, it's like pew, 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 move on to the next scene. You don't really, maybe except Chrono Trigger, where you finally learn there's what's it called? Blah, blah, blah for your actions.
Consequences?
Consequences. Like, oh, wait, when I robbed that one person, it did sort of amount to something.
How many times have we reverted to that save state? Because they're like, oh, no.
So is it that there's at least between live theater and video games then, and now I can't think of the vocab word.
I know, right?
But when you're complicit in the action, as an audience member watching live theater, even though you're not necessarily doing the action that the actors are doing, you're still watching them, and they can see you, you can see them, even if they don't nod at you and go, wink, you're still complicit in what they're doing. Mm-hmm. You're still sharing that kind of moment. And I would like to think that video games also give you that kind of idea. You're actually, obviously you're looking at a screen, but you're kind of doing it too, and you're a part of that experience.
I would definitely lump cosplay in with that as well. There's a reason why especially MAGFest is such a big cosplay place, is because the theater, games, and cosplay, everybody wants to put themselves into it. It's different than a movie. You're actually in it. It is you who is making it happen. It's you on the stage, and it's you in the costume. You are such an integral part of what you're doing.
Video games are corrupting our youth by making them all actors at MAGFest. I love it. I love that so much.
We're encouraging more profits for cosplay designers and wardrobe designers.
Hey, I have a wonderful Full Metal Alchemist cosplay that I happily paid for.
I think that the whole putting yourself into the character and feeling invested also adds to, there's more development, or at least attempts at development at better VR games that put you in the middle of an actual situation to try to make it as real as possible. And I think they're trying to keep that theatrical feel as tied in as they can. I don't know. It's a weird question. What was the question? Thank you for coming to a 9:30 p.m. talk.
If
by the way.
being within the moment. So let's if you want to use movies as the comparison, but within a storytelling experience where in theater you're watching an actor or actress. Well, I believe actor is the correct term again. You're watching them do something, so you're kind of engaging in this shared experience between you and the actor is very similar to the experience you have as you playing a character or watching that character do something on the screen and controlling that character, where it's a much more powerful link versus watching someone on screen going, what are they going to do? No, don't open that door. You know there's a murderer behind that door. It's not as connected to me. I think it's not as emotional. I think that both formats lend to a larger emotional investment and then a larger catharsis at the end of the action.
I think a lot of it too is these days we're more bored by long cutscenes. We definitely want to be able to interact and make a decision as soon as possible. We aren't as complacent in just watching things play out.
Yeah.
Like, there may be a cutscene, and there may be a tap to continue and choose A or B. Does he scratch his head or his kneecap before the person talks to him again? Like, you still want to feel like you're in there, even if it's just progressing the story along.
And also a lot more connectivity between cutscenes and the gameplay. Like in the new Mortal Kombat games, you're kind of watching a movie, but then there's no like, now you're playing a game. It's like the camera turns, and then there you are.
Right. So actually, and you brought up a point that I kind of wanted to touch on, Liz, was just the kind of the video games becoming a cosplay thing and sort of taking on the characters literally yourselves and going out to play them. Was just talking about or thinking about the link between actors and actors that are playing characters and people that are playing video games and those characters. Because it's, I mean, like at its very basic sense, an actor's called a player, and a player is also a player within the terms of a video game, and to me that's a similar process that it doesn't really get acknowledged. Is that?
Oh yeah.
Oh my God! Yeah, you're taking on a character and becoming that person.
Once you've walked a mile in their shoes, like you can pretty much answer for them.
It's method acting digitally.
Yeah. And for those who are unfamiliar, in a lot of game engines, that's actually the terminology is the actor.
Yeah.
Whenever you're picking up the pieces, like you move the actor and the actor does something. Like they've used the theater tech verbiage in there, which I've always actually kind of liked. They kept it there.
Taken such ownership over your character.
Yeah.
I always kind of like that you rig a character, but being a stage manager is like, well, rigging means something else, and I like it.
But I think one of the other cool things about playing games is that the more open the world is, the more, and this is similar to theater, the more you can watch people who aren't the focus character that you're supposed to be watching. You can go find that merchant and just keep talking to him and hear his tracks play through. And like, you're not necessarily supposed to be designed to do that, but you can. And just like when you go to see a live show, sometimes you find that one person in the chorus and you just watch that person. And you watch them either zone out or they're engaged with what's happening. You can swivel your world around because you're actually in it.
Right. Yeah, you get to control the view.
And I will say, as an audio designer and someone who's had to work in both VO recording and direction, the scripts have grown tremendously in size for NPCs in the last decade or so because people are getting more familiar with, I'm in this world and I can do anything. And I will poke that guy selling tomatoes 47 times and ask him how his day is and see if he knows where the dragon is. And he may not know, but I'm going to keep poking him. And you want to hear at least 47 different responses that sound natural, because you want to give that player what they want, and you want them to be rewarded for being curious.
I think regarding VR, one of the more amusing things that I did recently was I was pulled on to do audio for a VR experience where the people in the background had to mime most of it because the mics were live for the whole thing. It was like a big theatrical thing, but the people who were miming, they needed to have words coming out, like they needed to be making sounds. So if somebody chose to look at the people who you're not supposed to be looking at, you had to be able to hear something. So I had to watch these two people
Oh, God.
in the corner of the screen.
I just realized that I worked on that. I know what you're talking about now. Oh, we did that. Yeah. So to kind of explain what she's talking about, so you've seen a lot of 360 videos come out in the last couple of years, along with the VR, right? Everything's around you, and you're supposed to be watching the experience. And people who don't come from a theatrical background expect you just to look wherever they point, but they forget that VR is everywhere. You can be like, well, the action's here, but there's a bird tweeting over there, and some guy scratching his boot over there, and God knows what. And even though stuff's focused here, you have to think like a lighting designer almost in theater, where you have to focus the action. Liz and I have done a lot of opera together.
People get real weirded out if it's totally silent.
People get really creeped out if something's totally silent. And if you've ever seen an opera or a musical or a play where two important people are having a really important conversation here, but you're in a street fair like Carmen or something, and there's a crowd of gypsies, if they're all in the background going like this, and you, for some reason, maybe one of your friends is in the crowd, and you don't care about the two actors, and you got a free ticket, so you're just like, what are they saying? That's so weird. But you want at least that walla murmur. You want some human sound, like, I don't know, coming out of the people, because it destroys you. Because whenever someone's watching a play or a movie or a game, and it feels natural enough to have silence or something that just puts it too much off, it destroys the experience. So Liz was called in to be a dubbing walla person to take the scene where they shot it, 360 video. They only mic'd the two important people, let's say, talking at the point of focus, but you have a crowd around you with these pairs of people, and they're just going.
And I think I probably watched
And
it
it's
like 9 times.
friggin' disturbing. So she had to watch people in corners and lip sync to them and just make
And they're, like,
non-distinct
sipping
verbiage.
tea, and I'm like,
And it's muffled and small, and you wouldn't think it would bother you, but theatrical people and people who don't like to be ripped out of something very cool
Will notice.
will notice that is a blank spot. And it was this cool thing where they did a test with some audiences, and that was the main thing missing, and we were able to fix it after a couple rounds. But I think that's totally theater brain that directs that type of edit.
So in a more technical theme question.
Let's get technical.
Let's not get too technical. But within, so we kind of mentioned it's like development communities, like the makeup of all the people that put on a show, lighting, sound, set construction, costumers, sure, actors. I was one.
You might need the actors.
Right, the movable props is what they are, and I'm fine with that.
Puppets.
But I think there's a lot of similarities between the groups of people that exist in theater and the groups of people that make video games. Like it's.
Oh, sure. Producers, for one.
Yeah, producers are incredibly important.
Well,
Yes.
well, I mean, at least production manager / stage manager equal director
Right.
of team / producer.
Right,
Like,
stage mom.
It's basically, yes, the stage mom character exists in dev and also in theater and a lot of other type things too. It's fun what happens when you don't have someone in control. You learn that on smaller theater productions when there is no head of a project. I found a lot of parallels.
Yeah, no, one of my mentors in theater was a producer, and I was like, I don't know what you do, but I love it. Because he's the one person that could talk to everyone, calm situations down, understood the artistic and the technical needs, and it was incredible. And he's a cool person. But concerning other roles, would you draw direct parallels to any roles in theater and games? Like, okay, lighting and lighting, costuming. Artists.
Texture artists.
Right.
Especially depending on the game too. There are even people that specialize in just game character costuming, I think.
Oh yeah. No, but one I'm always curious about because I always get a different get a different answer is code.
Code.
Who would be code in theater?
Oh.
Right. The blocking.
Code could be the blocking. That could also be the animator though, depending on. But
Right.
who does the animator?
And I know light designers who code in their lighting programs, but that would also be lighting.
Script supervisor would probably be whoever's running the dialogue
The author,
system.
you think? The person who actually writes the play?
Ooh,
Or would that be the narrative designer?
That would be your narrative. Oh.
Well, designer definitely does a lot. I know that the engineer has a lot of go between.
Would it be the director?
Designer, director, project
Fight
lead.
choreographer would be like your battle
Your
coder
animator.
and everything. Oh man, there's a lot of crossovers. It depends, but I feel like the lighting and costume people always have to get along because, especially with the texture technology we have now in 3D, like whatever fabric someone's costume is made out of has to look really good when that dramatic lighting hits in that one scene. If it reflects too much, you got to talk to the particle guy. If there's dust coming off of it.
I was wearing some checkered pants the other day, and my husband, who is a video game engineer, said, "Your pants kind of look like when they're modeling somebody and they want to make sure the texture doesn't stretch, that they make them into a checker pattern." And I said, "Okay, all you had to tell me is I look like a model in these pants."
So it's,
And not that you can see where the stretch marks are.
when I
That's
was,
where it. That's a modeling joke.
no,
That's bad.
no, all I can think of is Zoolander quotes.
Man, yeah.
So I love, and I can't
There's
really
so
program
many. We should have a chart. I just want like a chart of all the comparisons.
because there's so much, like ushers. Where would ushers in a theater fall into? Because I know they
QA.
would fall into. Dang it, there you go, QA. They fall into that.
Because the
that
ushers
same
also
cycle.
collect the surveys before intermission.
Well, your testers are going to be your audience.
Your board of directors would also be part of QA because they have to take all the surveys that can turn in after intermission, and they have to consolidate all the feedback and report it to the production head that then goes back to everybody else.
Although it does come back to everyone on the team should play your game if you're making games. Like everyone
wow.
should QA, and which brings me up to. Oh, all right.
I just want to say to explain why everyone should play your games. If you're working on a theater show and no one ever takes the time to actually have other people in the audience sit and tell you if it's funny or actually makes any sense,
Yeah.
it's bad. Like you should always make sure that whenever you're doing a show that
The third-party opinion.
Yes, someone
Not invested.
get someone not invested, and also make sure that to check in with all your actors and your choreographers that are we having fun? Is this a good show? Is anyone liking this show? Is it obvious to the audience that you hate being in this show?
Fostering that feeling of that you're not afraid to be able to share your actual feelings on a project.
Yeah.
Because
The culture isn't that kind of toxic.
I feel like we've all played a game and or seen a show where you knew the team hated each other, or there wasn't I'm seeing lots of nods, or there wasn't any fixing cycle, or maybe there was feedback, but obviously nobody got the feedback. Maybe half the cast quit during production.
I've definitely been in a show where the artistic director had not read the rewrite of the script, and I was like, "You might want to read this. It's going all over the place." And then later she comes in and she's like, "Oh, we have to cut some of this. This is too long." And I was like, "Thank you."
Yeah.
Definitely had that happen in games too, where they're like, "This isn't a water level anymore." I'm like, no, we cut that. Sorry. I mean,
Yeah.
do it more tactfully than that, but
Yeah.
But it's so important. And it's what I learned in theater is just like every day there's people are running scenes, they're up and on stage, they're in front of the director, and the rest of us hopefully are either doing other work or watching. And it's so critical to have the people you're working with see the work you're doing. And just that level of being clear
Vulnerable.
and vulnerable.
Being
with
vulnerable,
everyone around
being
you.
ready for criticism and taking it
In
well.
the way that it is intended.
Yeah. And not being prima donnas. I feel like there are shows where there's someone on the team that is like, they're going to let them do whatever. And there's also game teams where, but they're going to let them do whatever.
There's a big piece of investing yourself, especially like if you're a performer and you're putting yourself literally there, and it's your body that people are looking at and judging and making decisions upon. That's a thing that is hard to separate from yourself when you're actually looking at the nuts and bolts of the thing. They're very different, and you have to accept that they're different. And the same thing when it comes to putting your creativity into so much design.
You're putting your digital baby out there for everyone to play.
And then they're going to pick it apart and it's going to kill you. But you have to accept that that isn't you. It's just a piece.
So when you're working on a show and or a game,
Yeah.
I distinctly remember Working under union rules, but still having like week of show, kind of like a theater version of Crunch. Yes, I'm gonna bring it up.
No matter what, that show's going to go on the date that's on the posters.
Right.
And so will the game launch on the day
It's going up the flagpole. Let's
Yep.
see who salutes.
And there's a pretty strong continuity thread between those two practices, but there's a much higher turnover rate in video games than theater, a little higher burnout, I think.
higher turnover.
Burnout.
And do you think it is possibly, and it doesn't have to be, but I'm curious because I think it is, because of the existence of union rules in one practice, let's say theater versus not.
You're talking to someone in two different costumer unions.
It's something.
And I can say that we in film have already figured this out, is that people, any industry that people want to do, theater, video games, those are like the hot thing right now.
Movies.
You need to, in movies, which was back then, you've got to stomp down, and now, you got to stomp down right away, not taking advantage of people. I think taking advantage of people is a big way to burn people out.
Oh, God, yeah.
You hear about these AAA designers and people working for the big companies, and they are like, they have like PTSD over the kinds of crunches that they're forced into.
Oh, yeah.
They really need somebody to nip that in the bud and make sure that these people are being treated fairly.
And I think there's not a lot of movement currently on unionization.
Well,
and
the first person in the water that might, they're gonna, the first person essentially to say, I won't stand for it.
Oh, well.
People have to follow, or else.
I mean, I will say on the vocal side of things, there has been a lot of big blow-ups in the last couple of years on unionization and trying to like SAG-AFTRA and trying to get support, and it led to a lot of game development studios
Getting blacklisted.
like blacklisting people who were trying to do it and not wanting to hire a union ever again. And I know a couple of people that are union. I know a bunch that are FICOR, which means you can work both sides. I work in Texas, which is a free-to-work state, or right-to-work. What did I always say the wrong one? Right to work, so I can work on union or non-union projects, which is great. But my current reason that I'm still non-union is it kind of unfortunately helped me that whenever all the union activity scared a lot of bigger companies off, they went and hired more non-union folks.
Sure.
But it did raise awareness during the big blowout, which is helping people who have not become union yet of our health is actually bigger on their radar now. They did pay attention. It's taking us some time, but like I always tell people, singers and vocal artists, your instrument is made of meat. Once you fry that meat, it's like trying to uncook a steak. Like, this is our livelihood. If you don't take care of it and you don't respect your voice actors, a lot of the issues that brought forth the union strike was people doing like Warcraft growls. If you take someone and make them do an orc noise 400 times a week, you're going to destroy that poor person. You have to fight for fair treatment of your instrument if you want to get good quality. So I don't know.
Make sure that they're paid for their recovery time.
Yeah, right. And for people who that's their livelihood and they're professionals at that, people who are members of unions like that, like Liz, I know you get healthcare sort of benefits through the unions you're with now. People who do eventually get through SAG, once they're like, you don't just become union, you do have to apply. There's a whole process, the qualifications, but they do help for people where that's their 9 to 5 is voice, so they should get health. Meanwhile,
people are like, that's too much to pay per hour for a voice actor, and it's like, well,
that's their job.
That is their time and their recovery. You have to pay that, like that stretches over more than just the hour they're recording.
I feel the hard part with burnout though, because I worked both as I worked with a lot of nonprofit theater companies when I was stage management. I tell people I gave up stage management for my health because it did burn me out pretty hard. Because when you work for smaller companies that just want to keep producing, and they just plow through their texts, they're not as considered. I hope it's gotten better. I know the theater tech union wasn't as strong, at least back in Pittsburgh, but I had often wished that they had followed rules for so many hours a week, please let the person sleep, and so on. Games, though, as far as turnover versus theater, I think it depends if it's full-time or if it's indie, because indie game studios versus indie theater, and AAA studios versus is there AAA theater? Would you consider Broadway as AAA theater?
I think.
So it's like do they get? I would assume they're union
What, Broadway?
actors, et cetera. Anyone in Broadway
Yeah.
hopefully is part of some big union.
Well, that is when you're comparing AAA to Broadway, much higher turnover in video games.
Yeah.
I want to say it's, oh gosh, come on. I did this research at one point, 26% roughly on Broadway and something like 70-odd% in games.
But now when you say games for turnover, are you
AAA.
talking AAA,
AAA.
West Coast? Because
US.
okay, so just U.S. in general.
Yeah.
Because I know whenever talking to people, it seems like Los Angeles, San Francisco, Seattle, unfortunately, have higher turnover rates.
Because that's where most of them are?
Well, it's where the big companies
Yeah.
are. And unfortunately, I think it's a mentality where they are told that's how it is. You do these giant games, you lay off the whole company, you hire back some people, you rinse and repeat. So anyone living out on the West Coast, I was always told when I started working in games, be expected to be laid off every couple months because that's just what they're taught you do. I feel like in other cities and other places, like I know Austin's better at this. It seems like they're way more considerate of humans and life. They try not to kill you and they like to keep you on longer. But I don't know, I think it's like from audio, for example, I was always told within theater, film, and games, audio always comes last. Audio is always the thing that the least budget goes into, including music. And audio is second after catering in a film budget. Because audio, who needs audio? It's the last important thing. And I would talk to people who graduated from game development school, and producers were being taught, but audio always comes last. And I feel like if you grow up and keep teaching people that the creative parts of a department
Starving artist.
are a starving artist, they will always be starving. They would always come last. That hurts growth and trying to treat people better on all of these creative fronts. It's just, we got to be better at telling, drop the starving artists. Make us better paid. Support. I don't know. I just don't like that people are raised just saying artist equals starving. I think that's a bad.
Gotcha.
It's not good.
And I definitely see that any friend of mine that, besides a programmer that's gone to work in San Francisco, and I'm not kidding. I knew a grad student that was going out there. He got a summer internship at a big studio, and he was paying $10,000 for rent so he could go intern at a studio.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, man, that's not. I know it's your dream, but
It's for the credit. And
I remember hearing that
living the dream.
when you're living in LA, you go from having a roommate to having a spouse, and both people have to be working hard full time.
It reminds me of at least when I was starting on theater, that everyone warning you to not get taken advantage of, about whether it's headshots or demos or whatever, trying to skirt that sea of, is it worth it for that one credit, or is it better to just hone your craft, whether it be digital or physical, and start going to do the work? And I'm going to say it's better to just work on yourself and put yourself out there in the not the least costly manner, but the most appropriate, the fiduciary responsible manner. What's the another vocab word that I can't remember?
And I'm trying to think how this relates to games.
Well, because in games, internships for one, which I know have gotten better, but are still a little shady.
Yeah.
I talk to people all the time. Like, oh yeah, we don't pay our interns. I'm like, why?
We're paying them an experience.
It is funny how some of the bad habits of theater have evolved into,
Yeah.
the theater industry have evolved into the bad habits of the game industry.
There's a lot of positive, but
a
there's
lot
some
of
negative
imposter
too.
syndrome that contributes to taking advantage of people who are less experienced and making them work for cheaper
Cheaper or free.
or free. Especially, you'll see that in theater a lot.
Theater, especially musical
Community
theater.
theater.
Yeah,
Right.
especially community theater. A lot of advantage
Everybody
of college
wants
grads.
to do it, so everybody's willing to do it, even devaluing
Oh, yeah.
what would be a very
Well, again,
priceless talent.
I like to point the finger and say that our educational institutions need to stop saying that it's expected to work free internships. I've been, but even back when we went to Duquesne University, and I remember that being on the career in arts, whatever class that they were teaching for a bit. It's like, oh, you'll be expected to work like at least 5 unpaid blah blahs, and that's just how it is. it's like, well, if we keep telling everyone that that's okay, it's going to keep going. I think
Yeah.
our job, especially as some of us are in the older generation now, we should be encouraging schools to stop saying that.
Yeah.
Because
Agreed.
it's going to bring forward more misery and really actual starving artists moving forward.
Well, I mean, also, we're at a time when a lot of these video game companies, when they started out, maybe they didn't have a whole lot of money, but that really can't be said anymore. Like, it's essentially people putting, I wouldn't say across the board, there's definitely smaller startups, but I will say that, like, there's a lot of average people putting themselves out there to lend a hand to millionaires who are paying them.
Well, but it's the investors. They only put a small bit of their. Never mind. Yeah.
Priorities.
So looking towards the future, I've been very hopeful in seeing, I think, games evolve emotionally, messaging-wise, experientially, VR. Do you think, both from the art consumer standpoint and maybe from hopefully the development standpoint of the development process, that we have at least the potential for positive change? If not, we're on a better track? Or do you think we're going to kind of maintain some of the bad habits that we've been taught?
Positive change in development or positive change?
Todos, all of it. Because I've been comparing where we are right now in video games to getting sound and color in film. Like, we're finally figuring out, oh, it's more than just explosions. Like, so we're figuring out these other methods of expression, these other richer, deeper experiences that we can have. Because
You mean like why Undertale is amazing?
it's Undertale's the example for everything. First of all,
Whenever I think emotional and how great storytelling and getting you sucked in and you care about characters, I think the best example lately has been Undertale, and it goes back to old school style art and like that 8-bit feel, but the storytelling sucks you in and everything matters. And I feel a lot of people, there's so much, especially you'll see around things like MAGFest, so many fan spin-offs and support systems from it because people feel like it's a real thing and they're tied in and they've bought into the whole universe and the missions and blah, blah, blah.
Well, thanks to Steam, a lot of those passions can be, like Undertale was essentially a very, very, very small team, and it ended up being so valuable.
Mm-hmm.
but that's just it. That's our. I'm sure we can think of other ones if we all brainstorm, but that's easily a common touchstone is Undertale.
Yeah.
Whereas I could probably bring up a Shakespeare play, and we can all kind of go like, oh man, the first time I either saw or was in Romeo and Juliet or Midsummer Night's Dream or Much Ado About Nothing, and you'll, I think, at least have some of the similar emotional responses of, oh my God, I remember when the first time I did Our Town and someone fell off a ladder. And because almost every rehearsal someone does.
Yeah.
It's happened because just like a game, there's certain things that are always going to happen that we can all relate back to. And I think games are getting even better at that, where it's not just, remember the time I beat Bowser? Yeah. Okay, I've been beating Bowser for 30 odd years. I'm ready for it to be a much more complex expression and shared experience.
I remember playing Double Dash with my sister, and we remember the time when I was the gunner and I punched everybody, and everybody flew off Rainbow Road. And I was like, I'll always remember that
Rainbow Road?
forever.
You're a
It was
monster.
Rainbow Road. And that's just like, that's your fall off a ladder experience.
I feel like I get the sort of thing you're looking for, Sean, in some more RPG experiences, not so much video games, but I know like one of the most emotional feelings I've had in an RPG, like you weren't there for the later years of Sven. In D&D and Pathfinder, I had this recurring character through multiple campaigns of a badger named Sven. He was my sidekick, and he was a dire badger that shrunk because I read the rules wrong, so he became a normal-sized badger, but he had PTSD because he remembered being a giant badger, so he would always cry while going into the berserker mode and then like pass out. Anyway, so Sven followed me through all these campaigns, and then finally, later I was playing with a campaign with people that you don't know, and I brought Sven back, and he finally was a dire badger again. He was so freaking friggin' happy to be in this universe. And this cloud mist launch that I did, like a mist thing, Sven went off before the mist activated, and the mist parted, and all of these monsters killed Sven. And I felt like I took literally 7 years of my imaginary fantasy life, bringing Sven back to his direness. And it was heartbreaking for me that I got so invested in this friggin' badger. He had manacles, he had armor, he was like, he's going out there, and then this mist happens, and the DM is like calling off all these skeletons murdering him and all this stuff, and Sven's crying. I'm like, oh my God. And I thought, wow, I got really into this game. And it's like, I just, through the D&G franchise and just having fun playing with people and being invested, and I put so much effort into this fuzzy little guy, 6 foot tall. It's just like, I was in, man.
You said something also that reminded me. One thing that you said that really triggered a thought was playing with people. Video games, I think, now have become more community-based than they've ever been. And that's another similarity between them and theater,
Right.
And D&D.
Right. Like whether it's after a show, going out to a lobby and talking to people who saw the show, or for me, reminiscing about playing World of Warcraft.
Or being in the show.
Or whether or not, I mean, you could, sometimes you, as an actor, go out back in the lobby and, I just want everyone to say I did a good job. Okay, cool. But even hearing people talk about those experiences, like that's what's left over after the curtain falls, after the screen goes black.
My sister-in-law was saying that her 18-year-old son, she said, he and his friends will meet up, they'll go out to dinner, and then they'll all go to their separate houses and then meet online and play. Because that's where their setup is, and that's where their setup is the best. But like they're all in their own houses, but they're on the headsets and they've got the thing, and they're
definitely did that in my guild. Yeah,
they're gaming, and
hell, and
it's become a community practice. It's part of the extension of a night out.
And even like talk about the D&D
Date
thing.
night.
Even after I recently moved to Austin, and Liz, me, and both our husbands and our friend Jack still would play D&D over Google Hangouts. And we even positioned it so we could be playing, and on the couch in our living room, Jim and me sit on one side, and then we have our TV, and on your screen, you're sitting there. So it's almost like we're an actual semicircle playing D&D, and we're all sharing a screen in one corner we can watch like the mini map. But it's like that idea of
Almost looking like a game of chess.
over the internet we're still playing, and it's just that makes it feel real, is the humans, whether it's on the headset, seeing them in a video chat. I don't know. But getting to talk about stuff after, I feel like that's what MAGFest kind of is, because everyone meets up and talks about their favorite parts of the game.
Well, so especially when it's a game that's not necessarily multiplayer, like you still have that rich artistic experience where you get to engage. And I guess maybe that is what cons are, is that you might have to hold on to that for 8 months or 11 months, but then you get to come back out and go, oh my God, I played this thing. And luckily we all get to play the thing. So it doesn't matter if you can go to Broadway or if you have to wait for the show to come to town. No, you can just go download it on Steam, go have that experience. I hadn't thought about the lobby concept actually until we were just started chatting about it, but oh my God, I love MAGFest.
The lobby the fact that
We're in the lobby.
The fact that I'm walking out
This
of
is
a
the game
stairwell
lobby.
for 2 minutes and I immediately run into a Wario and we go, wah, 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 wah. And it's like this magical moment.
And you hear about like, oh,
It's just-
everyone who's cosplaying this, meet at the gazebo at this time.
So suddenly there's 25
Giant
links
picture.
all next to a fountain taking a group picture.
And that's it. This is live theater.
Yeah.
That brought me back to my point very
Okay.
nicely. Does anyone have any questions? We have like 10 minutes
Anyone?
left.
Questions or I think there's even a mic there if you want to talk loud.
Or you can just shout at us. I can take it.
Project.
Yes.
Liz, right?
Yeah.
My name is also Elizabeth. This is funny.
Hey.
But as like a costume designer and with experience in both theater and video games, I was wondering if, like, you think there are any different considerations when designing for theatrical costumes versus like video game character designs. Like the thought process that goes into like what you should think about when you're designing both of them.
So I can definitely say that when I'm designing practically, and this is definitely something that I would bring across the board, if I'm designing practically for something I'm going to sew and it's going to be viewed from a distance, like on the stage, I look for upholstery fabric. I would look for something I mean, when I sit here looking at these walls, I can see these stripes here, and they're very big and bold. But I avoid things like tight prints because they'll look like busy snow, kind of from a distance.
It looks like a weird
it won't
gradient
project.
thing, yeah.
It'll look weird, and I think that with video games, like that's one thing I can definitely point at is that patterns, you have to think large, and you have to think large swaths of like somebody wearing a skirt or something like that. It may be as we're getting closer to VR, you can tighten up a little bit. That's becoming a little bit more film-like, where you can focus in on the details. But especially in the olden days, if you look at Mario, he's wearing overalls not because they wanted to make someone in overalls, but because overalls would make his arms stand out in the pixels. It was easier to tell which part was arm and which part was body. So that, I think, is a lot more of a corollary to the stage, where you had to think big, bold, large swaths of color so that the characters are distinct and they stand out from each other on a grand scale, versus the technology getting better, getting more film-like, getting more focused on details.
I will say, as someone I've been friends with some people who've had to do texture design and things, and it always comes up in the art meeting, what can you see up close and what can't you? Because everything takes up space, and giant, graphics of very detailed close-up, intricate things, maybe on like The Witcher, if he has like a weird brocade thing before his awesome hair shows up, and his hair is so good. But like the little details are saved for things that you have to be able to see nearby. Meanwhile, if there's a villager that is always 4 million miles off, they're not going to worry about the tiny intricacies because it's going to always be that blurry villager. So it comes down to, what do you put your resources into, and what do you need to do it? And also, what do you think that player is going to do if you give them a zoom function? Where are they going to put it? Because people hate being able to zoom in, and then you go, hey, everything's made out of tiny squares. I'm ripped out of the experience.
And I know, working for film, I can definitely tell you that a lot of places, Netflix cares what that guy in the background 4 million miles away looks like. I've tailored clothes for that guy in the background 4 million miles away.
Yeah.
They care, because the director may just decide to pull them to the front.
Wow.
They tend to do that. So sometimes, depending on how open your world is, everybody might have to be sharp. If it's theater, that might not happen. Can get away with a little more.
I know that I'm that person who wandered through every map in Borderlands and went up to every trash heap and eventually got too close and went, oh, now I'm out of it. That trash heap is made out of weird cubes.
It's human.
But if I just backed up 2 feet, it's like, oh, it's all mysterious. Hey.
But yeah, I would definitely say as graphics get better, you can they can do more with clothes, and you can just watch the evolution of someone like Zelda, where she has more and more intricate patterns. She has more like fabric that they can replicate more easily, that they can make more ornate embroidery on things like the pieces of her costume. It is nice that they can do things that defy the laws of gravity in a slightly more anime-ish way on different characters. And hair and makeup.
Hair's come a long way. Remember old CGI hair? It's so waspy. It's so real. It's like, it's like an evil alien.
As a basic go-to, I would say old video games are more like theater, and newer video games are tending more film.
Interesting.
And Netflix TV is slowly becoming higher quality than films. Because, it's funny.
Netflix will launch a game service within the next 5 years. I know it.
They already have an interactive,
See?
Yeah.
Magic. I knew it.
Wasn't that like the Bandersnatch or something? There was like the interactive choose your own adventure game on... Black Mirror had an interactive Netflix game. If you guys didn't play that, it was on Netflix. That technically was a game. So I'm just saying. And I bet their costume budget was pretty high.
Never mind.
Sorry, we derailed.
I was about to slant Netflix.
Good question.
Yeah.
Anyone else? We got like another 5
Questions?
minutes.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Yes, sir.
Does it surprise you that, like, over the last couple of years, there are actually some pieces of theater that actually use gaming as a plot point towards less, like, a couple I can think of is She Fights Monsters.
Ooh.
From D&D, I believe.
Yeah.
A couple years ago, the college I graduated from, they did a play called Level Up. I didn't see, but apparently the main characters were like slacker gamers. I guess it surprised you that that's gaming becoming a bit more mainstream, and it's like, well, let's try blending it into this medium, and it's actually finding an audience.
It doesn't surprise me. Of course, I'm very much of the mindset these two things are like just modern and ancient versions of each other. But when I was studying undergrad, it was 2002, 2006. And at that point in time, it was anytime you started incorporating like cameras or digital lighting or something on stage, like, oh, it's mixed media.
Yeah.
And I was at
Multimedia theatrical productions.
a game conference in California last year, and it was actually held at a local school, like a community college, and they had a theater, and they were actually having they had a whole track on theater that is incorporating video games and or game elements, because now that's a thing. Now it's
I
live
think-
theater as
Yeah. Well, I want to say
not quite
that
LARPing, but almost there.
I saw this.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say I saw this amazing version of the Magic Flute
Oh.
that was streamed where all of the characters were Nintendo characters, and I don't know
Yeah.
if they got the rights to do this because it was a professional company, and part of it was like a friend of ours was like, "I'm linking to this. Everybody watch it. It's like Opera LA or something, and they're doing the Magic Flute." But they redid everything as like. The main Tamino was Link, and Papageno was Mario, and like Zoroastro was Donkey Kong, and the Queen of the Night was, I think, like a Bowser analog, or oh no, she was Ganondorf, and Zelda was her daughter, and like all of these analogs. But they did really cute things with it, where like one of these scenes were the two guards who were like Donkey Kong's henchmen were giving exposition. And Tamino, who is Link, just kind of sits up and goes, "Hey," and they like start the next thing. He goes, "Hey," and they do the next line of dialogue, "Hey," and then eventually the Mario character, his sidekick, is like, "Wait, don't we need to know all this information?" And he's like, "Oh, we'll be fine." And they're like, "No, we have to do it again." So they like leave the stage and everything goes dark, and then it comes back up and they restart the scene and do it as it should be. And it was so clever.
I have two quick things because I know we're running out of time. First, I think it's great how many opera things tie in well to other like existing what do you want to say, storylines, fandoms, existing materials. Like we took, what was it, Don Giovanni. Liz and I were brought on to rewrite the libretto to Don Giovanni to Bram Stoker's Dracula, and it was
Almost one for one.
It was almost one for one. If you know Don Giovanni and you know all the characters in Dracula, there's someone for everybody, especially knowing that obviously Don Giovanni is Dracula, Leporello is Renfield, the Commendatore is Van Helsing. We've got the brides. Like it was an easy fit.
Zerlina, Lucy.
But it's just the funny thing.
Donna Anna.
It was so much.
Nina.
I just love mixing things. I mean, hell, we're from Smash, so it's like that's like what we do. But what's it called? She Who Fights Monsters. Girl Who Fights Monsters. I wanted to see it. It was in Austin, but I have the screenplay at home. I bought it. And what I love is that not only is in that storyline, I feel like it's the first time there's a play that acknowledges that D&D is something that people just do. It's like there was this era, I know when I was growing up, my mom was one of the people that read, was it Chick Tracks, or what's that comic that said that if you play D&D, you're going to go to hell, and if you die in the game, you're going to hang yourself, that whole thing. My mom was mad because the DM looked like me in high school, because I had long black hair and I dressed in goth clothes, and she kept saying, "You're going to be that DM, oh, don't play D&D." I played D&D anyway. But like the fact that now there was a play written where it's like, well, obviously this girl goes off and she plays D&D with her friends, and they wrote like the spin-off where that's how she gets rid of her stress and deals with life. And no one going to that show is like, what's Dungeons and Dragons? Do the youngins play that? What is that? It's like it's a commonly known thing, and it's not a demonized thing anymore. It's a way people are playing games.
Stranger Things.
Yeah, and even Stranger Things, it's like,
into
well,
the
it's
D&D.
understandable. People are playing D&D, and they're not calling them devil worshippers while they do it, because it's like, no, this is just an acceptable form of gaming now.
Yeah,
It's part of
theater's
our culture.
Still art, and art reflects modern culture.
Yeah.
So
I also like that a girl was playing D&D in a play. I just want to say that. Power to you.
I did get to costume a very short opera for kids that was actually a choose-your-own-adventure, where at the beginning, the kids got to decide whether the soprano or the tenor plays the lead, and whether the alto or the bass plays the sidekick or villain. And their choices actually did change the music selections that were in the thing. It wasn't just lip service where people just switch lines. It was, I thought that was real clever. And that is a game. They put a game in for the kids to play.
The audience is playing the game.
It's a form of playing a game, making choices.
Don't even have time to get into theater games, but.
Oh, man, yeah. 10:31.
Oh, yeah, we're at time.
Any quick questions before
yeah.
they kick us out? No one's running yet.
Yeah, I don't imagine there's another panel after this immediately.
Anyone have anything else? Those were good questions so far. I'm so glad you brought that play up because I really wanted to see it.
Audience Liz.
Now I'm going to read when I get home. Other Liz.
I guess along those lines is that, I guess we've talked a lot about what gaming can learn from theater, but do you think like theater can learn a lot from the technology that video games have to offer and what they can sort of incorporate into theater productions?
Oh, yes.
Oh, I think they've, like you mentioned, media interactive theater. I feel like they started to at some point. There was some push where crazy lighting became a thing, and
Right, and
cool
intelligent
times-
lighting and
intelligent set changes and spinning platforms became a thing, and things like now sometimes there's choose your own theater things that are now a thing. I feel like stuff's already starting to do that.
I think also a lot of what, like from my experience, I'm mostly a theater person, but I'm also married to someone who makes video games. And people who are involved in, like, video games have to sell. Like, they're not really, there are art games, but they're not really accepted. They're not a form of like, go to a museum and play some art games. Like, so they're not gonna get funding. So like games they're a media that has to push to the audience. And so I'm getting a lot more reminders that theater is not necessarily a thing that you do for the conceit of the people making it. It is most rewarding when it plays to the satisfaction of the audience.
But I will add that I do have a parallel in that I have been on the board of directors for a Gilbert and Sullivan troupe back in Pittsburgh before, part of the publicity committee. And one of the issues that they were having when me and my husband Jim were brought on to help out is we were the young people who knew about websites and things like selling tickets on the internet instead of paper. And it was this whole new concept, and our whole thing was to revamp stuff and make it more poppy, to work smoother and better for as many users as possible, meaning one, make a website that doesn't look like it was GeoCities from 4 billion years ago, which meant WordPress and brown paper tickets and finding all these things, make stuff that worked on everyone's phones. I feel like that's parallel to games. And also trying to look into how many ways to bring in younger people and more players in a way, and that their audience for this GNS troupe used to be great, but it got to a point where their main audience that kept coming back was always the same people, and they were getting older and older and older, and they weren't bringing in younger folks to not only audition, but also come to the shows. So we had to up the internet presence and make it more visible everywhere to bring in the youngins, college age and up. And also we had to make the art more poppy and more fun and interesting, and the lighting better, production, and et cetera. Everything you could do bringing it in, just kind of like in games, you got to fund the thing, and you got to get the word out. You got to make Kickstarter exciting. You got to offer bonuses and prizes and maybe a sing-along event or something.
Yeah, theater has kind of a bad habit of blaming the audience when the show doesn't do well.
It's all your fault for not coming to our show. And they're like, we
you.
didn't know to look at that one page of the newspaper that no one reads anymore, that you exist. So I think both, even though there's an artistic vision, and sometimes for a game, especially if it's an indie game, it's that person's artistic vision. Both will only really ever succeed if they sell tickets or if they sell copies or downloads. And in the end, it becomes a financial thing.
So I feel like they have to justify themselves
to
the right audience.
And a lot of that comes down to, especially in these days and age, if you don't have an internet presence that is easy to find and works on mobile and webs and like on browsers and also on your iPad and whatever, forget Flash, that's gone, right? I remember Flash. And I now have an iPad, and it's like, no, Flash. But yeah, like everything you have to be able to find it. If you don't exist on the internet for both things, you won't sell seats.
Don't make it hard for people to see your show.
If you make it hard for someone to see your show or to download your game, you're hurting yourself. So I feel like that's a big parallel, is how to get the word out and find your audience, cultivate it and grow it.
I've heard people say, make it as easy as possible for people to give you money.
Especially donations. I mean, heck, if you're someone who's like, I don't want to sell it, but I'll take donations. If you don't have anywhere where they can click a PayPal donate button, don't expect people to just drop dollars at your door, especially if they don't know where you live. It's like, make it as easy as possible for them to help you make your art, whatever that art is. Yeah, I mean, to me, that's the biggest parallel. I mean, I hate it coming down to money. We talked about unions and stuff earlier, but
Well, that's fair.
it does take, especially we talked about pay your interns and don't keep the product going. If people move forward saying, I'm just going to starve for my art, and then I want all this free help from all these people who I'll never thank. If you're not going to pay your helpers, at least be kind, courteous, and thankful, and always give them something they can add to their resume, write a million letters, but give something back. And theater too, theater and games, like always support your peeps. I find that I hate when people take advantage of folks, and if it's an honest, they just need free help and they can't afford it, give something in kind back. And I think the universe could all do better at that. I feel like we need like a da-da-da-da, the more you know at the end of the rainbow. Be kind, rewind.
All right. I think that wraps us up.
It's late.
Thanks for coming out.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for coming.
Any last words, things you need to plug?
I wish we,
Feel
All right,
free to
good.
take a Super Smash Opera card if you haven't
Yeah, we
seen
hope
our
to-
our show. It's
Seen
on,
our- oh, yeah, if you haven't seen Super Smash Opera or Aria Kart,
previous shows are on YouTube.
they're on
from
YouTube,
MAGFest.
yeah. Just look on the MAGFest thing or go on our website. We have a list of all our video links and music links if you ever want to listen to some classical music about people murdering each other. It's fun.
Or racing each other.
It's kid safe except one swear word in the first show, but you will have to find where it is. Otherwise, Steam, the opera, is going to hopefully come out within the year. It is a steampunk ghost story, which is amazing. I have my singing chickens on theblockchoir.com. Dracula radio play, which 3 of us are in, is still online. Check it out. It's really fun.
Listen to all those episodes.
Listen to Sean's amazing
or if
Quincy
you want to be a
Texan accent.
purist, you can listen to each one on the date that it's penned.
Yeah, but they're all on the
Every
internet.
year we rebroadcast it starting on May 3rd.
Otherwise, yeah, just Sean, you have anything to pitch? Your podcast.
Oh, a Wasted Knowledge podcast. If you want to hear 2 professional bartenders interviewing subject matter experts, anything from hairdressers to interventional radiologists, as we make them cocktails.
Sounds great.
That's a Wasted Knowledge. It's basically drunk personal history.
It's like drunk history, but
drunk personal history.
personal history.
Yeah, it's it's a good time. I like doing it because that's my day job as being a bartender, and somehow people are like, "Wait, free cocktails? I'll come on your podcast." And then I'm like, "Well, you got to talk about what you do professionally." And there's like 5 guests at least that are named Pat because we couldn't use their real names because of their jobs.
There's Pat, and Pat.
Right, Pat? You sound different today. You feeling all right? Yes. All right, cool.
My name's
But
Patty today.
wonderfully fun if we feel like talking to interesting people, but not having to get out of the house or the car or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's on
And
everything.
you might get drunk while listening to it. You never know.
You could.
I think
Hi.
you could. You can encourage people. Tell them what you're drinking at the beginning of each one. And
I do.
You
Yeah.
do? Oh, my
We talk about
God.
what we're drinking. There's a segment where we're like, what are
I'm
we having
listening
today?
to you on the plane. Anyway.
I made butterbeer one time. It was good.
Oh, my God. Listen to his thing. I'll teach you how to make butterbeer.
I make a really good butterbeer too.
Oh, boy.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
everyone.